inspired by kingdom principles that work for you.
Thank you for watching Forward, Upward, Onward Together. My name is Carey Turnquist, and I'm just so delighted that you've joined us. We know that we in the Caribbean are just so dependent on tourism. And so that's why we're going to have this conversation. We have felt the awful effects of the pandemic. There are bright spots, however, and the tourism recovery is on the horizon. We're going to discuss some strategies for Caribbean tourism stakeholders with some of our hoteliers from the region. And so we welcome two young hoteliers from the region. Kamille Huggins hails from St Lucia, but was born in St Vincent and has heritage from Grenada. So she's almost pan-Caribbean. She has a rich background in hotel management, project management, and business development. We also have Lesley Taylor, a revenue management executive in the hospitality industry from the Bahamas. And so, ladies, thank you very much for joining us in Forward, Upward, Onward Together.
Thank you for having us.
So glad that you've joined us as well. So we know that the pandemic has really hit all corners of the world, and the Caribbean is no exception. So, Kamille, I first want to start with you. I did a little bit of reading on the numbers in St. Lucia, and it looks like you all fared very well during the pandemic. Comparatively, not a whole lot of cases, and if I saw this correctly, no deaths.
That is correct. Up until a couple of weeks ago, we had only about 27 confirmed cases. A couple of them were actually expatriated back home, and we've had no serious cases, and everybody had recovered. The numbers have picked up recently, but still no serious cases and no deaths, and we have had a few recoveries since.
So just out of curiosity, what do you think was allowed for so much success? So much of the world, in the Bahamas in particular, we've been challenged, by COVID, but you all have had a great amount of success.
I think one of the things that helped us is our government and our medical professionals have been very strict and stringent, and in some cases, some people might complain that we're a little bit too rigid, but I think the proof is in the pudding. By being as rigid as we have been, we've managed to keep our numbers low. It doesn't necessarily make for the easiest vacation planning, because it does require some testing and work before you can come to St. Lucia. But at least with that in mind, that we are keeping everybody safe. And,
absolutely. Safety is key. How strict have you been? You said that, there were some complaints in the community about people just being, just it being too strict. How stringent were your policies?
Well, for visitors, it required a negative PCR test at least 7 days before travel. There's a pre-arrival registration form, and you're only allowed to stay in a certified accommodation. And even for returning nationals, the home quarantine to qualify for home quarantine required a number of things, and such as you have to be of a certain age, either very young or very old, or maybe with a medical condition that might make it difficult for you to be in a quarantine area with other people. But otherwise, you had to stay in government quarantine for 14 days. And for the visitors, those who came and stayed in the certified accommodation, they're restricted to the hotel property. And gradually during phase 1, a few sites and attractions reopened and a few tours were allowed to operate. But there were few, which meant that for the majority of your time on the island, you have to remain at the hotel. So for some people, they thought that was a little bit too rigid. Of course, if you're coming to beautiful St. Lucia, you want to see the island, you want to experience the culture, you want to taste the foods and so on. So it can seem a little bit restrictive. but it was in an effort to protect not just the visitors, but to protect the locals. And, it was a necessary evil in this case.
Yeah, you all seem to have like a very defined paradigm of what guests can and can't do, and you have these are the tours that you can go on that are approved. Lesley, we could definitely learn from
Mhm.
some of their experiences as well. It seems as if it's very well planned out. November 1 was our kickoff again for the tourism opening, where guests are able to come to the Bahamas without having to endure the 14-day quarantine. What are your thoughts on the government or on our approach here in the Bahamas to the reopening plan?
Well, I feel as though we have been thorough. We've learned a lot from our neighboring Caribbean countries. And I agree with the pre-testing. I do think the 5 days is a little short, but granted, it will give the most accurate results. So just like St Lucia, we have a pre-PCR test that's required for each visitor coming to the Bahamas. And that's 5 days prior to arrival. We do not have at first we were planning on having a vacation in paradise, which is similar to St. Lucia, where they have the quarantine certified hotels. But now we are allowing our tourists to experience the island, experience the culture as fast as they can, while still being, social distance, wearing their mask, all of the local protocols that are put in place. And then along with that, they have to also apply to the government for the visa. It's a health visa. And I think, Carey, starting November 14th, they're also going to be required to have the insurance. So it's a COVID insurance that's required for each visitor coming to the Bahamas until day 5 of their stay, where they'll be required to take another test, the quick rapid test.
Yeah.
So I think
Right.
overall, I think it's thorough. I think it's a good idea. It's a plan, which is a great plan. Hopefully it'll work. If it doesn't, then we'll try something else. But we have to do something to try and move forward and get the economy back to where it needs to be and get the tourists back to the Bahamas. So any plan is better than no plan.
To your point, we just have to sort of turn the car on, at least for us. Kamille, since the new reopening, since you all have reopened, has tourism looked different at all in St. Lucia? Are there any new strategies that you've been trying there to restart the tourism product in St. Lucia?
Not too much. I mean, of course, we've had to make adjustments accordingly. So, a property that probably would not have had a very strong entertainment lineup or daytime activities would then have to introduce these type of things to their portfolio, because now the toys are on site, so you have to keep them entertained. With the restaurants, for instance, there are some restaurants that are approved for serving visitors, and so we have tourist nights. So one night a week is dedicated for visitors, which it's something new. Normally, most tourists like to mingle with the locals and pick up on the vibe, but things have changed. But in this way, they can still enjoy some of the restaurants outside of the hotel while maintaining a safe distance.
So if I understand this correctly, you're able to still create a St. Lucian experience, even though the guests have to stay on property.
Yes, this is one of the more recent developments that have since phase 1. So we're not 100% in phase 2. So we're like at phase 1.5, where they're introducing new things, but not opening fully. So that's one of the things that they've done, and including opening some of the sites. So there's certain sites that for certain hours it's only the tourists who can go there, so that you don't find a mix of the locals and the visitors. And I think for the most part, the locals appreciate that because we too are concerned, so we don't necessarily want to be mixing too much. So it works, I think, for everybody. So basically, we're still offering the experience for the guests while maintaining. So you just have to be creative in how to provide the service and provide the experience that the guests are coming for, but still maintaining a safe distance between the visitors and the locals, so everybody feels safe.
But how do we still create sort of some sort of cultural energy when guests are able to come onto the island?
I think the safest route would be mainly, open the beaches. Our tourists' number one reason they come to the Bahamas is for the ocean, the beach, the weather. Once the beaches are open, we can focus on the food. Make sure that we have the Bahamian cuisines there, the cracked conch, the conch fritters, the conch salads, all of the seafood. We Bahamians love our belly and we love to eat. So once we bring the food and beverage back into the hotel, the original, authentic Bahamian food, I think that's a good, safe start. Anything else, we have Junkanoo, but how do you safely bring Junkanoo?
It's hard to do that in a socially distant atmosphere.
Exactly. So other than that, food, some Caribbean drinks, some music in the background, have your little pool gatherings and encourage the guests to go to the beach. There's nothing else that we can really do at this time because of the protocols that are in place.
As you ladies say, this is a very difficult time for us in the region, just as we start to reimagine tourism. But we also have some downtime, during this time to really look at areas in our tourism product that we may not have been able to or didn't have to take advantage of before. I want to hear from you. Have we really tapped into, and we're going to be on the other side of this pandemic at some point. So, how can we use this downtime to really reimagine cultural tourism, for example? Lesley, you spoke about Junkanoo. We can't really Junkanoo in the COVID era. I know that there's carnival in all places, in many areas of the Caribbean as well. But, how do we leverage these festivals for our advantage? At some point, we'll be done with COVID. There will be a vaccine. And, guests and locals will want to take advantage of these festivals. I open it up to either of you.
Well, in the Bahamas, we Junkanoo is our spirit. We've recently started the carnival experience as well. I think it's just more in the PR, getting the locals involved as well, so that we can invite our friends and invite our families that are not living in the Bahamas to come in and enjoy the festivities with us. With Junkanoo, maybe have a section that's just for tourists and invite tourists to come in and jump on the line and jump in the road and have a good, authentic time with us Bahamians and just feel the music and enjoy the festivities, the lights, the costumes, and just the pure environment of the festival itself.
I agree, and I think a big part of it is the music. I think that's something that can be shared. That's the experiencing the music can happen virtually. It doesn't have to happen in person. And so once we get the music out there, and it creates a vibe that I think people will be able, even in the comfort of their own homes, they can still enjoy the essence of Carnival, of Junkanoo, of Kopofa, of all the other festivals that we have around the region, because I think that makes the festival, that's a big part of any festival that we have here. So if we can get the music out and then have, whether it's virtual parties or social distance parties or something like that, but I think that is the biggest element of the festival that we need to promote and get out there. And from that, you can kind of stem off. I don't know if you want to do the virtual carnival with the costumes, get somebody to just go make your own flag and get a feather here and some glitter there and what have you. But for me, I think the biggest part is the music. Just get the music out there. And once you have that constantly playing, by the time we are ready to have the in-person festival, people will still have that feeling in them, and it'll still be that desire to come and participate.
You know, there's something really infectious about the music of our region. You know, you could be in Germany or England or in Australia. There's something, you know, very infectious about it. If it's Junkanu, soca, you know, the music from crop over, reggae, dancehall. You know, there's so much infectious. There's so much, so contagious. You know, you just can't stop moving, and in many cases. And I think, to your point, that there can be in the branding or the rebranding of the tourism of these islands, music has to play a pivotal role in that.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and this is something that I was thinking about a lot. Not, you know, music and culture is one aspect. You know, Lesley, you talked about the food, that conch is the staple from the Bahamas. Kamille, educate us. What's the traditional dish out of St. Lucia?
We do saltfish and green fig or green banana. That's our national dish, and it's really good.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I know. So, you know, we could use our rich culture, our rich music, our rich food that we have, but there's also like a tremendous amount of history that we have at our disposal that we really don't use. You know, I use the example of, you know, Columbus's landing on San Salvador Island. And, you know, there's a cross right there. I think somebody, last time I was there, which was years ago, but, you know, someone stole the plaque that was there. And I don't know if we're really using and leveraging our, you know, historical sites, our historical monuments. You know, we have a rich history of, unfortunately, of slavery. And, you know, we have these plantations that dot the islands that, you know, tourists may be able to, and locals will be able to take advantage of. How do we use the rich culture and history, specifically history, to our advantage as we really rebuild in the COVID era?
Well, I think for me, there is a lot of history in St. Lucia, especially. There are a lot of places or locations in St. Lucia with historical value that is not necessarily being tapped in at the moment. Recently, I have started, and this is me, I have started hiking with a group of people, and we have found that various places that we've visited was full of history that is not commonly known among the locals, and definitely not necessarily known by our visitors. And we found that these trails lead to some beautiful locations, whether it's waterfalls or just general scenery of overlooking valleys and other areas. And I think that if we were to tap into some of that, one, it will take us outdoors, you know, because even with the whole COVID thing, they're saying, you know, if you can be outdoors as much as possible, then it can help reduce the spread, as long as you, of course, practice social distancing. It keeps you healthy. Mm-hmm. And you learn, you know, some more history about the various islands, and, you know, you get to see different parts of the island, except other than the typical beach and, you know, the more popular sites. So I think for St. Lucia, this is an area that we can tap into, and it would also take people, sort of the masses, away from the typical sites and reduce the footprint, which would then lead to, you know, a more sustainable environment for some of these sites, you know, like our Sulphur Springs, where we see hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. It's very nice, but, you know, you might want to reduce the numbers going there on an annual basis or a daily basis, just so that, you know, you can maintain the site itself. So by opening up some of these areas, like the interior of the island and some of these trails and so on, then you're spreading people around. There's not a cluster of people at all the popular sites, and then you're teaching them new things about the island and showing them new things to see, the flora, the fauna, and all of that. So, and the history about the island.
You know, we have a great advantage over many regions of the world. You know, right now in many areas in the north of the United States and Canada and Europe, it's cold, and so they're not able to take advantage of the outdoors much longer. And so we have this advantage of year-round for the most part, year-round warm weather in the Caribbean. And so, Lesley, there are so many historical sites, that dot almost every single island in the Bahamas. And, in your opinion, have we leveraged them enough to our advantage? And if not, like, how do we use these historical sites really to educate our people? Because many of us don't know a lot about this ourselves. But then also to bring awareness to the tourists that, we're this very rich historical country.
Yeah, Carey, you have a good point. I do believe that over the last few years, tourism has done an excellent job on, the deals and the specials and the BOGOs in regards to marketing the family islands. Because, as we're all aware, the Bahamas is an archipelago. And there's so much to be offered on each individual island. Like myself, I went to Long Island a few years ago, and the first thing I did was jump off the cliff in Dean's Blue Hole.
You're brave.
Ecotourism. Yeah. I usually have a bucket list and I do it once. So,
right.
But there's so much from each island that can be offered, that could be available. The legend of the Chicharni from Andros and Freeport with its ecotourism and all of the caves that's available there. Eleuthera with the pineapple fields. Like the Bahamas is so enriched with so many different aspects in regards to from the beaches to farming to fishing to the natural resources that we have. If we can just not only educate the tourists, but also educate our locals, then we'll have guests that come here and they speak to the bartender, they speak to the front desk agent, they speak to the taxi driver on the way to the hotel, and they get to learn about the different islands and say, the next time I come, I want to go to Exuma as well, or I want to go to Eleuthera as well. So I think it's just a matter of branding each island and allowing our locals to truly understand which each island can bring to the whole archipelago, the whole idea of the Bahamas.
I would visit.
That's
Anytime.
right. You got to come. You have to come and make a vacation out of it as well. And I definitely want to come and hike the hills and the mountains and the waterfalls in St Lucia as well. Lesley, you game?
It's an experience.
I would imagine so. I've seen the pictures of the Piton in St. Lucia and the waterfalls, and so I can't wait to come and visit myself.
Anytime.
Lesley, you're in revenue management as well, and have you seen? I've seen this mostly in some U.S. hospitality that I've been reading as well, where technology is playing a huge role in their service delivery as well. If it's contactless arrival services, do you see us employing technology at all in our service delivery, in the guest experience, using it even more than we have before, just to really minimize contact between the us as service providers and tourists?
I think a lot more can be done. I know the guests are supposed to fill out the form upon arrival and then hand it in upon departure. But what truly happens to that form? Are these guests contacted, a month later or a year later, and are they offered specials? Are they in the know of what's going on in the Bahamas, local promotion? So I think in regards to technology, because technology is so easy, it's a tool that should be used. I think that if we did a lot of follow-ups, we would be in a much better position, not just that initial, let me get your name, your email address, your phone contact. I think if we did a lot of that following up, that true hospitality, not only from a hotel aspect, but from a country aspect, a destination, I think that technology would be the best tool for us moving forward.
Kamille and Lesley, I think it's important that people just don't get, like a stock email or, just sits in their spam. But to your point, Lesley, it's important that we actually really engage with the tourists, engage with our guests, and send them information that they would find important and relevant. So you don't want to send,
Exactly.
not a 65-year-old, the hot night spots in Nassau, for example. But, something that would probably be relevant to them as well. Kamille, as you all are reopening in tourism as well, have you all used, technology, if it's QR codes or menus on smartphones at all? Have you been using technology in the service delivery?
From what I've seen, not as much as we should. We're not using it as much as we can. I don't think many people were necessarily prepared to invest the capital in getting all of the technology that we could be using. It's not, the last few months have been tough financially for a lot of people. So as much as we might like to, I think there are not too many businesses that were in a position to invest in it like they would want to. Now, we at the landings, we were fortunate that we had already begun investing in some of these things even before COVID came about. So it was just a matter of continuing with that and adjusting it to suit the current needs. So for instance, we are going to be doing the online check-in, online departure, using an app to send relevant information to our guests regarding restaurants that are open, or activities available, and also using an app to communicate with the employees. So we don't have to have all of these staff meetings with everybody crowded in one office or in one space. So now we can send relevant and pertinent information to the staff with through the apps. And in our case, our property is a mixed-use property where we have homeowners and tenants on property. So we also have another software that we're using or introducing where the homeowners and tenants can pay their bills online, check their balances and all these things. So there will be no need for them to come into front desk anymore to settle accounts or anything. Everything can be done remotely and online. So we were fortunate that we had already begun that process and that we were in a position to do so. But I have not witnessed it as much around the island, like the various restaurants and other locations where it could be adopted. But again, I said, financially may not be possible.
Yeah, a lot of these programs, could be cost prohibitive, but it's good to hear that the landing is really using technology to, make sure that you can stay socially distant. As you said, you don't have to have staff meetings because the information is right there at your fingertips, using these apps as well. Ladies, in closing, I just want to know if you had any recommendations. So Lesley, I'll hear from you first. What recommendations would you have, say, for the Ministry of Tourism and other tourism stakeholders as we rebuild tourism in the COVID and in the post-COVID era?
I think my number one recommendation would be just to have an open dialogue. When you're making decisions in regards to hotels, the hospitality industry, just to make sure that there is a dialogue between, CHTA, Bahamas Hotel Tourism Association, the veterans of the industry, just to ensure that what they're doing is not only best for the destination in regards to the locals, but also to ensure that it's benefiting the hotels as well, because tourism is our bread and butter. And when you have a tool that's right there in front of you, I would advise them to try and utilize it as much as possible.
Yeah, to your point, we have to have all stakeholders at the table, from the hotels to, tour operators.
Correct.
And to use our industry partners, such as the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, CHTA, as you mentioned as well, and BHTA and our many tourism stakeholders. So, that's really astute that we have to make sure that the dialogue is always open. Kamille, what recommendations would you have for your government and other stakeholders in St. Lucia?
I would agree with Lesley that there needs to be open and honest dialogue between all stakeholders. As much as I think the government being very rigid in their protocols sets a good reputation for the island as being safe, there also need to be some feedback from those of us on the ground who stand to either benefit or lose from what the government is doing. So there needs to be a lot of open and honest dialogue between all the stakeholders involved. And of course, sharing a form like this where you're sharing ideas between the different islands, what works and what doesn't work, so that we can all be on the same page. Yes, we all kind of competing for the same guests, but at the same time, we're all part of one big Caribbean family. So it does hurt to share information and to share ideas.
You're right. I think that we'll be better off if we see each other as collaborators rather than competitors. And so, ladies, I'm so glad that you took your time out of your busy schedules. Both of you are working on your tourism and your hotels' reopening plans and really living it right now. So I'm so glad that you took time with us to talk tourism. Thank you both very, very much. And thank you, our viewing audience, for watching us at Forward, Upward, Onward together. Don't forget to like, watch, comment, and subscribe to RBNTV. We'll see you next week.
You're watching RBNTV. We are networking, promoting, we're scoring points for you, proclaiming, declaring, here to encourage you. No matter the problem, we will enlighten you. We hear you, please listen.